So you have to take a car, and everybody has to take a car,
Right.
you're going to have traffic problems.
Or you
There's like 1 million people on the live stream, right?
About a little bit under.
I'll direct all my attention towards the people at home. Just, there's more there. 1 million.
Well, the camera view's not even on yet, so.
Ah, I've been wasting all this time staring at the camera. Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me. I could wait until the camera's on, but like I said, I'm here for the Pittsburgh Tech Fest, and I really wanted to get out and do this for the community and to get some feedback on it and to try it and see how people react to it. This would be the first time I'm giving this talk in public, so any feedback is very appreciated, and that would be really great. Typically, my talks are very much, they're soft skill talks. They're meant to be more inspirational or artistic in some way, and this is no exception. So if you're looking to learn code, I apologize in advance. There's no code in this talk, but hopefully it'll be fun. And some of the demos will work and some of the demos won't work, but we'll see which ones do and which ones don't. Hopefully it'll be the important ones, and if not, I've got backup videos for everything. So I am good to go anytime.
You're good to go.
Good to go. Hello. Welcome to Pittsburgh. But you guys are already here. Welcome me to Pittsburgh. I'm here to talk to you guys about unusual canvases. My name's John Brown, and I'm a creative technologist. And what that means is I like to do a lot of weird stuff with technology. I have this very firm opinion that anything can be connected to anything else through technology, be it digital, analog, physical, it doesn't matter. I work at a company, an instrument I work at a company in Portland, Oregon called Instrument, and we're about a 130-person creative agency, and we love collaborating between disciplines to make cool stuff, from websites to apps to installations, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So when I say I love unusual canvases, it's anything. It's projection mapping. This is a Plinko game. It's a ripoff from The Price is Right, but it's an interactive projection mapped game that I made a couple years ago. To physical light sculptures, this is at a festival called Pickathon that takes place in the forest once a year in Portland, Oregon. I got all the parents' permission, all the guardians' permissions before taking video of the kids to show it in public. I just want to stress that, so these aren't weird, creepy photos. And so these are 4 of the things that I love about doing these types of installations, these weird creative things. You get to see people actually use it. I make websites and I make apps, but generally it's just a number in an analytics chart that says this is how many people are using it. But to actually see people use it is an entirely different feeling. And these weird projects also, you get to use a different part of your brain that you don't normally use on a day-to-day basis. It's never the same thing twice. And everything is always unpredictable, and we're going to get into that unpredictability and the highs and the lows of that. So these are questions that I get asked all the time. How do these things even get made? How hard are the problems to solve? How do you come up with ideas, and is it worth it? And the answer is, we're going to talk about that today. Not as hard as you might think. That's also something we'll talk about today, and it's absolutely worth it. So the first thing we should get out of the way is forgetting about the perfect idea. This talk is about iteration. It's a talk about failing and trying something new. No good idea comes out fully fledged. It's always either a collaboration or a series of failures. And that's all this talk is about things that did not work. So we're going to do an introduction. We're in the middle of it right now. We're going to talk about brainstorming and prototype. Talk about two of the parts of the project that I worked on the end of last year. We're going to talk about the installation trials and tribulations, and we're going to do a wrap up. Also, fun facts. I brought special candy from Portland. These are handmade caramels by my favorite candy company. So, because I want this to be a conversation, if anybody has questions along the way, please interrupt, ask. If you ask, you'll get a caramel. We have salty caramel and popcorn caramels. So, I'm going to start going. I've got 45 minutes worth of talk here. But interrupt me, because otherwise we're all going to get super bored of just hearing my voice. So, continuing with the introduction. Again, work at Instrument in Portland, Oregon. Not sure why I put that in here. Oh, I actually do remember. So, at Instrument, we do a lot of work with Google. We've worked with them for about 9 years. For 7 of those years, we've done branding and or installation work for the I/O conference. And in 2016, the GCP, the Google Cloud Platform, wanted to spin off of Google I/O and create their own conference, the next conference. So the Google team, one of the Google teams came to us and said, will you create a playground and installation area to show off some of the products that we want to talk about, some of the things that are coming out of beta, and make it a really interesting experience for people. And so we did. So we made a couple of projects. This first one is called Query It, and it's a trivia game where you get to go against strangers and answer questions about the internet. But as you saw there, it is Googling, or it's using BigQuery to hit billions and billions and billions of rows of data all at once in real time. So it's billions of rows of data in 15 seconds. There's another thing that we made, the Emoto booth, which takes your photos. We say, show me joy, anger, surprise, sorrow. We take those photos and we analyze them, and we try and we use the Google Cloud Vision to get the sentiment out of them. These were super successful. Again, you get to see people high-fiving, making new friends. They're getting up in front of all of their peers and making these big emotions and these big faces, and it's a really fun experience, and it's a really rewarding thing to have worked on. So these projects come about by 3 things. Show, don't tell. Tell the right story, not the whole story. And move quickly from talking to doing. So what these mean are, don't just display the information. Show the information in real time as much as possible. Don't just put a bunch of words somewhere that people aren't going to want to read. People don't read. That's the thing I've learned about installation work. You got to give them small infographics, otherwise they're not going to get anything. People are going to walk away with 1 or 2 facts and a feeling about what it is that they just experienced, and they're going to remember that in 2 weeks or 2 months. They can say, I love that thing. What was it? I'm going to Google it and find out more about it. Tell the right story, not the whole story. We'll talk a little bit more about that one. And then move quickly from talking to doing. This is about prototyping. It's about trying things. It's about throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks early and often. So, for example, how those things manifest themselves in the Emoto booth was, we actually showed the JSON, this super complicated data structure, but then we also made it super fun and human and inviting. So the people like me who are super nerds can get into it and see the actual the data that's behind it, but then people who don't necessarily know a lot about that can still view it and have a great time. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the Cloud Vision API. We took one thing, like one sliver of one part, which makes up the whole, which is just that sentiment analysis. And we told a beautiful story about it, which gets people hooked and they want to learn more about it. And we also moved quickly from talking to doing from a prototyping standpoint. So this originally was this game where we made robots, and it would say, show me a baseball, and you'd hold a baseball up in front of it and drive forward. And then it would say, show me sunglasses, and you'd show sunglasses and move forward. But we made some prototype robots, we hooked them up to the Vision API with cameras, and we realized within about 2 or 3 days that these were getting super unwieldy, the batteries went out really fast, you had to have this long space. It was just a terrible experience. So then we thought, let's do this. Another one of our ideas was like, let's do a photo booth. Sort of like you'd see at a cheesy wedding where you'd grab a snorkel mask and you'd put it on, somebody else would grab a pizza box, and then the background would be replaced by an underwater pizzeria or something like that. But because we tried this and we had these big cutouts of hot dogs and all these things that we could use for a prototyping perspective, we saw that the API actually wasn't very good at that. So within a couple of days, we realized, oh, it just thinks this is a photo shoot. It doesn't say, here's a hot dog and here's a pizza box. So it becomes this really good way of trying out these ideas and then throwing them away because they weren't working. And then we ended up with the Emoto booth, which we saw earlier. So those 3 steps are really what guide us. It's a way of thinking to get through these projects and to do these relatively unusual things that are, out of the browser. Actually, technically, all that stuff was in a browser. Those were full-screen Chrome browsers, but it gets it out of the typical keyboard mouse situation that most people are interested in, or most people know. So they came back to us a couple months later and said, hey, we're rebranding Google for Apps. We're calling it G Suite. We knew that at the time. Nobody else knew that. So it's this premier rebranding event that they want to do in San Francisco. They want to do it for 350 hand-picked CMOs, CTOs, CIOs from the tech industry to talk to them and say, here's our stake in the ground. We're here to stay for apps and for work, so the enterprise level. And they want to show something new and special. So they're like, no problem, right? And we were like, cool, no problem. We'll figure this out. Like, we can get this done. It'll be good. So this is the space, the San Francisco Mint. It's this beautiful old historical building. And so we went and we did a little walk around in there. And we learned something. It's a historical building, which means we couldn't drill into any walls. We couldn't hang anything from almost anywhere. Basically, everything we needed to do had to be these facades, which really limited what we could do from a physical perspective. And we only had this hallway because in the basement were these super old, super cool safes, which were still actually technically functional. There's this entire hallway just lined with these safes. And we ended up putting a couple of cool installations in there as well. Very creepy, very scary, very dark. And we came up with 2 things in addition to the query and the Emoto booth. So this one's ASCII Mirror. So what this is a live animating Google Doc using with a little camera like right next to the screen. This was something that we're super excited about. It never is going to run 60 frames a second. It's not this really insane like data visualization, but it's using the actual doc in this animated way. And we lined the hallway with these. Then we also did the same treatment to Google Sheets. So we figured out a way to actually animate Google Sheets in real time. Again, not 60 frames a second, but it's a Google Sheet. And that's weird and cool. And every time we got on the line with the Google engineers, they were to ask them a couple of questions. They'd say, "Why are you doing this? I don't understand." We're going to talk about process. So I showed you a little bit about the end result, but I want to take a step all the way back to once they say, "Will you do this event?" And we say yes. And that's where brainstorming and a ton of prototyping comes in. So brainstorming for us essentially means get designers, get developers, get producers, strategists, producers, people from HR, get a bunch of people in a room. Let's just talk about the project. We give them a briefing, we give them some stuff to read, but then we say, what are some projects or what are some ideas? Like, what can we do? And then, after we have got all these sticky notes, we then start to explore and we do prototypes. But really quickly, what we realized from the first experience that was really powerful is we actually told the products to tell that story. So we decided, let's use the actual product as that canvas. This is where the unusual canvas part comes in. So instead of talking about sheets or talking about maps or talking about Chromebooks and all those things, we actually wanted to use them to create art. So the thing we need to do was, instead of telling the whole story of everything that a Google Doc can do and how incredibly collaborative it is and all of the backup features that it has, we just wanted to say, hey, let's just take this one element that we can and let's just say, here's all the things we can do from a visual perspective. Very small part of it. So we did 13 demos in 6 weeks between 4-ish developers with some input from designers and producers. I want to walk you through a couple of these demos, and we're going to cross our fingers and say that, hope that they work. So, demo number 1 by Carl. Oh, it didn't work. We went to the wrong website. Okay, we're just going to skip that one. Heat map particles. Here's another demo. Fingers crossed. Let's see if this works. Okay, great. So this was because Maps is also part of the G Suite, the Google for Work idea. One of the things we wanted to say is, what can we do from using Google Maps? So we had this idea for something like a Connect-driven experience, and we started putting a bunch of these heat map particles in here, and we realized, oh, they all act like metaballs. They're super neat when they interact with each other. Like, what are other things that we can use, that we can do to utilize these heat map idea? This is one of the demos. Let's see if this one works. That one's awesome. I didn't put the right links in here, everybody. That's a real bummer. But this is what that. So once we took all these like metaballs, we were saying, if we could map it to a Connect, we could map it to a human like running around, like what would that look like? And it might look a little something like that first portion right here. It's fun. It's weird. Like, we were having a lot of fun like exploring the Maps API and seeing what can we do in the actual Maps API. It'll be a fun experience. Also things like if we took a bunch of Chromebooks together and we put them and like we get this seamless experience across them. Chromebooks is a part of the G Suite where you could get them and sync them all for your organization. This idea of creating your own land or water image tile type thing, but then searching across all of Google Maps and seeing like, what was this thing that you just created? And I think this was Cuba, maybe? That's like Florida. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly where this is in the world, but the idea was to sort of map a one-to-one thing where you create a land mass and a water mass and find that somewhere in the world. So there were all these demos that we made. There's all these possibilities. There's some moonshots in there, but we ended up on the two things that I showed you before. So in addition to updating ASCII mirror, updating Emoto Booth and Query It, which we showed earlier, we also decided to make the ASCII mirror and that sheets in motion. And this is the thing I always go to whenever people ask us about this project. So the interesting things, and we'll go through a couple of these portions, are like there are a lot of easier ways we could have like done these things. We could have faked the canvas and done like a really fast animation in there, or we could have faked sheets and done something in there. But we really wanted to do it using the API, using the actual products, because it was hard and we knew it was going to take a lot longer to do. We were excited to actually use it and then use those things in a usual way to break them and figure out how far you could bend them before they broke. Here's a couple of other ideas that we had. So this is like, you'd put a screen on a wall and you'd draw like a body around it and the face would animate for sheets or docs or something. This is the idea of you're playing shuffleboard with a bunch of Chromebooks that are all sort of linked together. We also explored using Calendar to animate and tell a fun story, just using Calendar by popping up different notifications and adding and changing things that are on your calendar. Super fun. Using slides in a fun different way, being able to track where you are and flip between slides to show, sort of track you in space. This is one of the demos that did not work, but this is using maps to like wave away. Oh, this is in San Francisco. So I usually talk in San Francisco, but the fog that everybody knows in San Francisco, its name is Carl. It has a name. So this is this idea of, could you go up in front of a space and like wave Carl away? But all of these particles were actually built into maps. They would take the place of those little points, those little pink points you see everywhere. So again, using the maps to animate in a really fun and interesting way. Using Markov chains and dropping that into a doc, anonymous animals, which are a really fun part of the Google environment, magnetic darts, where you challenge somebody to throw darts at a map and try and get the shortest path between two, the shortest commute time. That was a fun one. It helps if you know the city that you're throwing it at, because then you can don't take the 405, take the I-5 or whatever it is. So, this super weird one, which was very complex, very cool, but also an insane challenge. So we ended up with doing the mirrors, doing the canvas, the sheets, and so we sort of like full speed ahead went down that path. Any questions so far? There's candy on the line. Oh, there's candy on the line. Yes.
Tell me about the Markov chains. What was that really all about?
Great question. Do you want salted caramel or popcorn caramel?
Salted.
Salted. So the idea behind that was to train the Markov chains based on different authors. So Stephen King or Shakespeare, whatever it is. And you could then, I'll throw this at you. It's actually softer than it sounds.
It's all good.
But basically feed these Markov chains full of different authors, and then a hopscotch center in front of you where you basically would go here, which you would branch to 3 different options, and you'd go here, and then it would branch, basically you play hopscotch as you went down the path. And up on the wall, you'd be creating your own Shakespearean masterpiece from historical Shakespearean information. So, another really fun prototype.
Did this predate or postdate that Where in the World Am I Street View game that you can find?
Post-date. This is just last year. I think that one was from like
That was
3
from
years ago.
a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Another great one. That was really good.
Was that you guys?
That was not us. I wish. That would have been so cool.
Do you guys keep a bunch of stuff like in a cab, like ready to go? Do you guys have like that hopscotch element? And you're like, oh yeah, we've got the hopscotch thing ready to go. We'll use this with this other, like, with the Google Sheets API. And like you have like a bin of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, these are sort of thought starters that we keep in our pocket to either, you know, we're having a conversation with a client and we can say, oh, we've actually done something very similar to that, and we can pull it up, or we use it as a jumping off point. So those particle simulators that you saw, it's like a leftover piece from another project that was another like prototype, and then we basically took those and pulled them over. So these things always, they both build on top of each other, but then also give us fodder for talking about ideas and projects with clients in the future. And because these things are small and really easy to understand before they get too big and too complicated, they're in this like this embryonic state that a producer can understand or a designer can understand. So when they go and they meet with a client and they ask them a question, they actually have like this institutional knowledge of the things that we can do with code, which is typically one of the harder things where you know, a designer gets asked a question, just like a side conversation when they're meeting with a client, and they're like, they ask them a question about development or code or what our capabilities are, and typically they go, I don't know if we can do that, or they bullshit, like one of the two. But in this case, like they have these small bits of knowledge to take forward. So it's really awesome. Questions? Oh, you guys both get caramels. Popcorn or salted?
Salted.
Salted? Two salted. Okay, we're gonna run out of salted, everybody. Wait, those are popcorn.
You gotta have backups for your
I do. I've got two.
How soon do you do the location scout into the development process?
Great question. Immediately, because we knew that would
Yeah.
greatly impact what we were doing. So, for example, this idea was based solely on the fact that we had these insane vaults that were like 10 feet by 10 feet, and that we knew they were going to be completely dark.
We have
Like,
this tiny little door too.
totally.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so basically all the ideas had to be vetted through time, resources, and space. Super important.
How much time do you usually get for the installation itself?
We're gonna
Do
get
you
to
have
that.
okay,
That's a great question. We'll talk all about it.
great.
Any other questions? Wait, salted or popcorn?
Popcorn.
Yes. I love popcorn.
Good. Oh, we do a handoff. Great.
I'll throw it right at you.
Yeah.
She's very close. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about the actual process of the two finished products that we showed earlier. So ASCII art. So this is essentially the slide. Oh, these are all slides in pitch decks to clients, by the way. Any of these things, the things are in this format, I took them directly from those slides. And even this idea of this gallery of these ASCII mirrors came from this much larger idea that we knew we had to simplify. So we bought them in with this idea. We went and we were like, okay, maybe this isn't the right call. Again, everything had to be facades in this space. So it basically became this idea. This right here is the first time any of us saw animation in a Google Doc. So not only did we just like clap and like love this moment, but we also sent this to the Google engineers that we were talking with, and they were like, "What are you doing? Why is this the thing that you're doing to our system?" We ran into insane quota messages. They were saying we couldn't do this much like computation on their system, and we would send those and we'd say, "What are these messages?" They say, "I don't know. I don't know why you're getting that message." And we'd say, "Well, we're sending 4 developers that are out there, each sending out 4 messages per second." And they say, "There's your problem." So one of the tenets, not only in making this real, but we also wanted to make sure that it could be represented or replicated by anybody. So when we were checking in with the engineers, we just wanted to make sure that nothing was going to break on the day of. But we were getting no special treatment. We didn't have access to any beta APIs or anything like that. They didn't put us on a special server. So it was this really good feeling of breaking things, but always within the system. Another idea is like using that same particle generator that we talked about, like animating sort of things like going around in the space. These are emojis of all the different flags in the country. We also did a little bit of playing with selecting of text as well. And this is the first time where I looked at it and I said, oh, this is actually a viable idea. Sam, one of the amazing developers on my team, posted this. This was like a bunch of thumbs up, and I was like, yes, this is great. But this is where things started to break down. So before when we were doing all these things, all these different pieces, these are all going up through the traditional execution API that all Google products have to run small scripts on sheets or on docs or on slides or whatever it is. But once we started to move past around this size is when we started to come and fall into problems. So this is the first time I saw any of color that was rendered in an ASCII version, and we were super excited about it. But here's the problem with, hold on, can I do this? Hold on. I'm also using Keynote for the first time in my whole life, so this is all very strange. So we're actually going to go to a docs. We're going to open up one of my, actually we're just going to go to one. So we're just going to do a little bit of typing in here. And here's the really interesting part. And it makes sense when I didn't think about this beforehand, but it makes sense in retrospect. Every single one of these lines is like a span. Like this is all done in the web, right? So each one of these items is its own DOM element. So when we're pushing up, so we just pushed up one color like this, right? Let's say this is ASCII art. I'm sure it will eventually be beautiful. But this is just one span. So we're pushing it up, and the execution API is saying, all right, I've got this one span of information, enter HTML, drop it in, we're done. But whenever we wanted to do different colors or different fonts or anything like that, it wraps each one of those, like, so basically when you get to the pink tongue from here to here, that's wrapped up in a span, a huge span with a ton of markup all around it to make sure it fits into the page. So when we, instead of just pushing up a string of characters that gets rendered, so we started trying to introduce color into it, is when it basically bloated by 20 times, because every single one of those color changes needed to be wrapped in a span. So let me make this bigger again. So this is the first problem that we ran into, because it's all divs all the way down, and it became a real challenge to be able to push up really interesting data. So what we ended up doing was writing a copy and paste bot. So short-circuited the execution API. And what we ended up doing was making a thing that would render the ASCII characters in Node, put into the clipboard, click over into the doc, paste it. come over here, get the ASCII, come over here, select all this, delete it, put it in there. So it became this thing that basically hijacked your system to be able to create these doc pieces. It was still really neat. You had because of this, you had historical context for all the pushes. You could basically scrub back in time and see the animations as they built up. It was a really, really fun idea. So this is the first video that anybody posted from our dev team of animated camera motion. This is Violet. You can't see her in there, but you'll see a lot more of her coming up soon because she did the primary bulk of the work on this project. This is when we knew we had something that was really great. We had the pipeline, we had the webcam, we had it all the way going up to the into the dock. But here's the problem. Because we did this thing where we were hijacking the system, where it was doing this copy paste over and over again, like 4 times a second, as soon as you started that was your computer forever. So Sam, the first person that wrote this little program, he turned it on and then he went, oh shit, I can't Alt-Tab over, I can't turn off the server, I can't click off of anything because every time I try and click something, it ends up pasting 1,000 characters into any window. And so it basically locked up his computer. And he did that probably 20 times. He would write timeout for them. But eventually what we ended up doing was just creating a remote that you could use WebSockets to start and stop the server. That's the only way that this project succeeded. So there's other pieces to this. So as you can see, all of this animating right here. This is the way that we got to getting the right size, the right margins, because none of that, or most of that information isn't in the execution API in order to use it. So not only that, we also had to write Chrome extensions for this that would eliminate things. It would set the dock to the right size. It was, at the beginning of the project, if you had said, well, do you need to write me Chrome extensions? I would say, that's a foolish errand. Why would I need to do that? But this is one of those things in these projects where you're doing this weird stuff and it'll eventually come up. You have to do something you've never done before, like write a Chrome extension. Some more images. This is Violet. When we were, so in addition to actually just showing the webcam, we were trying to drop the background out to isolate the human, and you'll see a little bit more of that later, but this was using a depth sensor to try and figure out where the human was and drop everything else out. This was just using bitmap background subtraction. Really bad, as you can tell. It's not like it doesn't do a really great job. This is Violet standing in front of a green screen. There's a halo around you. We didn't want to put up these green screens in this super cool, really old building, so this is also a no-go. So eventually what we ended up just saying is, we're just going to put it in front of white backgrounds. And it was a simple solve, but it actually worked, and it was super successful. You also get really cool errors when you do projects like this. This is a picture of Violet mixed with something else, but it looks like a death metal cover, and it's like my favorite artifact of this project. I have no idea what is happening in this photo, but I love it. And these are the sorts of conversations that I, as the manager of 10 developers, love to sort of overhear or see in Slack. This is Violet talking to somebody else about saying you're taking it from the matrix, encoded buffer, unencode it, turn it RGB, then take it, re-encode it from ASCII, and like this conversation, like these aren't things that I see in the conversations when we're doing websites or apps. Like these are really fun, hard challenges that our devs have a really good time trying to solve. This is going to play pretty near the end of the process, so this sort of shows you the fidelity and the speed. There's always like a little bit of a lag. It runs at about 4 or 5 frames a second, but it's in a dock, and that's my favorite part. Is again, it's never going to run super smooth, but just like by sheer dint of what it is, it's a really amazing thing that we've done with this stuff. Producers, the creative directors, even the team dog, like they all bought off on it. They loved it. It became this thing that we would just leave up, and we'd bring clients in, or students would come through, and everybody'd like wave their hands in front of it, and we just leave it running. So the idea ended up being, we're gonna make this hall of influencers. So all along this hallway, this really beautiful, majestic old hallway, we're gonna put these screens, and when nobody was, sticking their face into it, interacting with it, we were gonna be showing these portraits, these animated ASCII portraits of various inventors or influencers throughout the years. So, candy time. You don't get candy for this, but who's this?
Einstein.
Right. But candy if you know who she is.
Madam Curie?
Yeah, oh man, several people said that. Who gets the candy? What do you want, salted or popcorn?
Popcorn.
Popcorn, yes,
You
yes.
know, it reminds me of the still movies.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
before
That's a
the movies
lovely
on
way.
today, it was,
Totally. You got like that sort of like jankiness, you've got that lo-fi, it's black and white. I love it. It's a beautiful analogy.
yes, so you never know what the future holds for this.
Exactly. It's all cyclical. We always go back to old black and white. Edison and
Ada Lovelace.
yes, you already got one. Do you want another one?
I'm
Do you want to give yours to somebody else?
Yes.
Who else wants a candy? Caramel? Salted caramel?
Sure.
Which one? Salted?
Yeah.
Salted. Great. So the idea behind this was you'd have this hall of influencers. You'd say, oh, what's this? Like, what's Ada Lovelace up to? You'd go over there, and all of a sudden it'd be replaced by your face. The future of innovation.
How did you detect whenever there was a person there? Did
What's
you-
that?
How were you detecting whenever the people got in front of it?
It was just, we lucked out, and because we went with the white background, or basically we put it across from areas where there was not a lot of motion, we just did a detection of if more pixels were more pixels were changing. So if somebody in like a suit walked in, they would go from all white to all black or whatever it is. So that's how we were sort of detecting it. Super lo-fi, but it worked really, really well. There's a little bit of me taking a selfie with it. Love it. Okay. Oh boy, here's another demo. Fingers crossed. We're gonna see if this actually works. Oh boy, I've already broke. Oh man, what's happening? Where are we? Help me. I don't even have that. We're just gonna do this. Why is this happening? Okay, we're just gonna look at See, okay, first of all, see all this craziness that's happening with all these lines? This is because I accidentally ran the ASCII mirror demo without the remote, and it just started dumping a bunch of characters into my my terminal window. So if anybody knows how to fix this, please let me know.
What do you mean when you say fix it?
I want to get rid of all these yellow lines.
Close it, restart
I can't do that. I'll do that afterwards. But I've got all these demos running. I mean, I know it doesn't look like I have these demos running, but I do have these demos running. So we're gonna do.
Was that in a TMUX session?
It is.
Why not just attach from the TMUX session?
I'm so afraid. I'm afraid to. I don't want it to break. I don't want it anyway. I'm just worried. I'm scared inside. I don't like change.
That's why you're using the terminal multiplexer.
I know, but still, it doesn't. My heart hurts when I think about it. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. All right, this is a much smaller. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna zoom out. And we're gonna hope this works. So this is our fancy little Chrome extension that we've made. We're gonna load up our remote, which looks like this, everybody. Very fancy. Just go one button that says start, and it turns into the stop button. There it goes. Okay, but here's the problem. It's meant to be tilted, or I don't have my external webcam. This is no good, is it? This is a terrible demo. Hello. Hello. You can see my hand.
Something.
Yeah, okay. You can see my hand. You can see that it's working. The problem is I'm trying to run like 12 demos on here at once, and that's a bad recipe. So, I'll fix that. That, oh, what is happening? Here we go. That is the ASCII mirror demo. Questions about animating docs? Go Great.
Practical applications for the end consumer.
Great question. The point of our demos was to inspire and to make people aware that these things exist. So because of that, our practical application bar is very low. But what I would say is, if you ever wanted your own Hall of Innovators, we have an open source repo in which you could do it. Other than that, I don't know what the practical uses are. Which is another, I mean, it's one of those things where these sorts of projects are a challenge because you want to make meaningful things in the world, but sometimes you just want to make fun things. And there's not, you know, big thing or small thing, as long as what you're doing isn't hurting somebody and it's adding joy to the world, I think it's okay. That's a little bit like, I need to like tell that to myself sometimes, but yeah, these sorts of things are super fun, and the point of them is to be entertaining.
Was Google seeking practical application and that your company uniquely offered, I don't know, this vision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, our company does a ton of work. 95% of it is practical.
Right.
It's websites, it's apps, it's redefining internal docs, it's all kinds of stuff. But every now and then, Google being Google, they just want to have a little bit of fun. Google Doodles, we worked with them on their April Fool's videos and stuff. So the majority of the stuff we do is practical, and then every now and then they come to us and say, give us a little pizzazz.
Okay.
Like the Netflix socks.
Like the Netflix socks.
A local company called Deep Local, they made these socks where if they figured you were falling asleep, they would pause Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
And they used that as like a part of a Netflix launchy campaigning thing.
Perfect. It's practical only in the fact that it exists. Love it.
Question. So I can feel that if you are going to manipulate the DOM, it's much easier than actually doing those scripts. And they are like visually equivalent to the audiences.
Yeah.
So is that, and also can show the features of the product. So is there any reason behind that?
Yeah, great question.
Doing some much more complex works?
Yeah, so the answer is we didn't ever want to do something that the average CEO or CTO or whatever it is wouldn't do. So copy and pasting something into a doc, even though we automated it, is something that we can definitely see obviously anybody doing. But opening up the inspector and adding things in this way from like in a programmatic way, like actually editing the DOM, that's something we just wanted to avoid because we wanted to make it it's sort of like an integrity thing for us. It was like, there's definitely better ways to do a lot of these things, but we wanted to keep it as high level and as real as we could. A lot of that was just the challenge implications of it. But it's a great question. It's a great question.
Thank you. And popcorn, please.
Oh, we want popcorn, yes.
Not the real reason.
You wouldn't get to scrub back. If you edit the DOM, you can't scrub.
There you go. You want to come work for my team? That's the answer right there. Yes, you would not have been able to go back in time because you've been editing the doc manually. So, one of the features that we did, one of the features of this product was, oh, you can scroll back and you can see when the CEO of Coca-Cola like walked up and fixed his hair. Like you can actually like scrub back and have like a one-to-one from the webcam to the ASCII mirror, but you would not be able to do that with the other one. So, thank you. Great answer. Great answer. Okay. All right, we're gonna go to Holy Sheets. Okay. So another fun fact about Sheets is, or rather another fun fact, this time about Sheets. If we add another one of these guys. So, to let me, I'm actually doing some live coding, so let's do, please don't judge this because this is all on the fly. Can this, oh, I've actually already done this. Perfect. Nope.
You just paste all of your
Oh, see, I did it. Oh man, this is amazing. So, here's the thing about sheets. It's all just one big canvas. There's nothing on top of anything, it's all just one big canvas. So we do this. We're just drawing a red square on the canvas. That is very interesting because it opens up a lot of implications. In exactly the same way as what you're saying, why not just go in and just like draw on the canvas? Like that's something we could absolutely have done, but this is another thing where we wanted to say, let's actually use the API, let's use the script in a way that somebody would normally use this stuff. So this is actually a really cool thing that we found out about the whole infrastructure. Is anything you do in Sheets is actually just drawn through a series of canvas commands. Little known fact, but very fun as it says there. Okay, so here's some demos again. Everybody hold on to your britches. Do they say britches in Pittsburgh? Great question. No, the answer is no.
It's pronounced bridges.
Breachers.
Hold on to your bridges.
Hold on to your bridge. You've got many of them. Make sure you do it. Okay, so turn this one off. Turn on node pattern. So this is one of the very first things, very first demos that we made for the Sheets application. And essentially what it does is, it is updating this one cell slowly over time. So 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and all of these other cells are a modulo based on that one, off of that one cell. And all of these cells are being colored by a conditional that says from 0 to 1, 0 being white, 1 being this dark blue. And so anything in between there, shaded in. So patterns like this. This is also taking it just from that one cell on the very first page. Some more. So these are all different. Formulas. So this is our first idea that we had from like, let's do some animations. It was originally called pattern disrupt, where we wanted to have these things and somebody comes up in front of it and waves and changes it. So this would have been a process of learning all about some different formulas to animate this stuff. But we also want to try some other animates. Another anime that we tried. Nope, that's the wrong one. Was actually doing something a little bit more like this. So what if we wanted to do actual more pixels, like treat them more like a pixel on a canvas? So what this demo is doing is it is going through every single one of these cells and it's drawing this image. And so this says, if I do this, can you see this? Yes. So this is an FFFFFF. So this is a white square. And this is a whatever. This is a this hex color square.
Wow.
And then there's an execution script that's running in the background through the scripts editor, which is saying every time something updates, make the background and the text color the same as the actual content of the cell. But this was a cool idea, but it fell apart very quickly. Here's why. We did patterns. Oh right, let's actually talk about the problems with patterns. It can only interpolate between two colors, which means you could never get some sort of like off shaded color. It has to be between 0 and white or between red and green. So nailing what those colors should be would have been a really hard challenge, one that we just didn't have the infrastructure for. And there was no API to update those actual conditions from 0 being white to 1 being blue. You couldn't update that to the API, so anytime you wanted to change that, you'd have to go in manually and update it. It would have been a nightmare. So we looked at the image demo with the little weird, I don't know what that thing was, that weird thing. Here's the problem with that. Pushing up one cell 5 frames a second, totally within the scope. 4 cells, 4 times a second, it's all right. 25 cells, 3 frames a second, not great. But then as soon as you get up into the hundreds of cells, it's taking 2.5 seconds between frame to animate. And again, that's just by dint of the fact that you're pushing up a bunch of different frames, just like if you were pushing up a bunch of different colors from the Google Doc, and these all have to be rendered uniquely, and it just became this really bogged down thing because it's all happening in Canvas. It's not WebGL accelerated, it's just raw Canvas. and it made it a really slow process. But then, we're sitting in a meeting with one of my developers, his name is Matthew. I just want to say that for the record because I love him for this idea. He said, what if we just, instead of sending up 625 cells, what if we pushed up just to one cell, which we know updates every 200 milliseconds, but that one cell had all the information for all the other cells. So we ended up pushing up something that looks like this second layer. These are all the colors for the first 6 pixels. And then each one of the different cells says, what row am I in? 0. What column am I in? 3. And it would go 0, oh boy, 0, 1, 2, 3. And it would say, all right, make my cell this color. Brilliant, and it worked. But it needed 2 things. It needed a PNG renderer because of this process we found it was so much faster to push up a PNG and fill a square than it was actually just say, change the text, change the background. And also, we needed a step synchronizer. But because of this, and you'll see a little bit more down the road, but steps would get out of sync and you'd have this like weird jitteriness. But this is the first test of that. It's amazing. It's so good. It's like seeing a baby get born. I'm not sure. I don't know. It was a beautiful moment. So you can see a little bit of this is like where you get the pixel pattern and what the different PNG is, like right there. And then another one of our developers said, instead of just pushing up, like an algorithmic sequence of events, why don't we just take a canvas, make it really small, animate on the canvas, sample all the pixels, and push that up. So then we had off-screen canvases. So this little guy down here is taking all of its different colors, pushing it up. Oh boy, I should edit this video. Those are all sequence numbers, so you can see they're sort of there together. And because it's the canvas, eventually somebody will put the game of life on it. But you can see the jerkiness where it goes forward and backwards, and that's where step synchronization came in. We're going to also send up a timestamp and say, is the new information in here before or after where I was at? And if it's from before, throw it away. Only move forward from like a sequencing perspective. This is how we started to do some of these cool animations. We got to start actually using like drawing because we were just actually drawing on a canvas, and we could do basically anything we wanted from there. Again, we would have meetings with the Google engineers. They would say, this is awesome, please don't break our system. And also, we've upped your quotas because nobody's ever hit those quotas and we don't actually know why we have them. So we actually got to fix some problems on this Google side, which was very good. It's all about this collaboration and a bunch of people working together and like making these things and then getting together and it's like seeing what the output is. This is my favorite. This is one of my favorite parts of the process is basically these two doing this really awesome work and then throwing it up on this giant screen and saying, what do we think about this? It's a lovely moment of collaboration and people coming together. So we're actually going to try and look at this demo. So this is pretty close to where the end product finished. So if you see it flash a little bit, that's because these PNGs are coming in and they need to buffer. So these are coming in as like 1 by 1 PNGs and they're expanding into the cell. But this is unemployment data across the United States, animated in a Google Sheet. And it'll go through several other transitions to get to a bunch of other data. And this is what those sequences, I think this is what those sequences look like.
Yeah. Okay.
You can just skip that.
And here's what the formula looks like. It's just basically saying, where am I at? What row am I at? And all of these are exactly the same because they're all contextual. Great. We also did some work, because this is just a canvas, actually like piping from webcam and then animating that stuff as well. As well as we made this little harness here, which is essentially switching between the different animations and all that sort of stuff. So we actually built a framework for it, because when we open sourced it, we wanted people to be able to add their own animations or videos to it really, really easily. Again, not only was this a journey, like this was well, there's the word journey. Not only was this a process of like trial and error and trying to get to what the end point was, but also there was a million different ideas along the way. So this is like taking a selfie and translating into sheets, or using sheets to control an orchestra. This is close to that pattern idea at the very beginning. But what we ended up with was this data entry hallway where this is essentially the first thing you see when you walk into this event. It's in this giant 13-foot LED panel, and you're just welcomed by this moving data right when you enter into this premiere event. Puns are also a really big part of our workflow. There's a lot of really good ones on here. Sheet eating grin, 3 sheets to the wind. Can't believe it sheets. This is my favorite one. I want everybody to just process this. This is from Drake's Used to Call Me on My Cell Phone. Used to call me on my cell phone. That is pure pun genius. Mort is my favorite. Client reviews always go really well in these sorts of projects because everybody's seeing these things anew and they've never seen anything like it. And so people walk away like feeling inspired by the stuff that's happening. So, questions about sheets and the process that we went through for those guys? How are we feeling? Okay, that time. All right, start with installation. We'll go through this stuff relatively quickly. So the installation process was weird. We basically got 20 Alienware computers, the really small ones, and we cloned one image that had all of the different things you could put on there: ASCII mirrors, or ASCII mirror, the sheets, the Emoto booth, or the Query It game. And we made a little dongle system where you put it in and had a config file, and you'd restart the computer and it would load into the exact same thing, the exact thing you wanted. For a couple of reasons. One, it's super easy for the installation, and two, we wanted this to be something that Google could take, and they could take it anywhere they wanted to. They could take it on the road, and they could feel empowered to use these products in any space that they wanted. And this is a little Pelican case of 10 of those things. And this is me in San Francisco carrying 5 of these Pelican briefs, or Pelican cases, down to San Francisco, where it's sunny. It's not sunny in Portland, and I didn't like it. This is the first time seeing a giant 13-foot LED wall. Super cool. This is the first time we got to see the physical structures that the Hall of Innovators was going to be in, hanging from the ceiling in existing hardware, because again, we couldn't drill into anything or hang anything. Big no-no. We're setting these things up. These are the moments that make it all worthwhile, is seeing the people you work with, the people you've been in the trenches with, see these things like come to life and everybody be excited and smile. Best part. People get stuck behind LEDs, the LED panels. Your creative director comes in and tells you like 12 times that the colors are off and you have to keep calibrating the monitor. Totally fine. This is a dude taking a selfie with like a super professional camera in front of our super crappy webcam. An ASCII mirror. It was a very weird scene. We took like 1,000 photos, and then there's this guy who stood in front of one of the ASCII mirrors for 25 minutes with just his head amplified in ASCII mirror. He had no idea, but every time somebody would walk by, they'd laugh at him. And I felt bad for him, but also I thought it was hilarious, and I took a photo. We also did other cool stuff, like we updated the Query It game. We gave it cool LEDs and lights. See if this plays. Yeah, that was a cool little feature that we got to add. As well as we set up the Emoto booth that you guys saw at the beginning. So it was this really great experience. There are all of these ideas, all these things that are super fun, and tell these really amazing stories come together. And this is a photo of the team, most of the team. This is a really creepy room down in the basement. So, installation work. Anybody that has done installation work will know many of the things I'm about to say, but for people that don't do it and haven't done it, I want to give some tips and some thoughts because I love this work, but I was not prepared my first time. So, be calm. The key to a good installation is knowing that you have a deadline, but everybody wants you to succeed. And things are going to go wrong. Things always go wrong, but they always seem more heightened in an installation moment. But always being able to take a deep breath and just relaxing is incredibly important. Also, surviving and also thriving. So you asked how long the installation was. I got a new bracelet every day of the installation and the event. So it was 6 days long. There was a load-in day, there was a cable running and infrastructure day, there was an actual setup day, there was a tweaking day, there was the actual day of the event, and then there was a breakdown day. And I was so tired by the end of it. But these are like my badge of honor throughout the whole thing. People get tired and exhausted. This is Violet like trying to fix a bug that we never saw until we got to the actual event. And she was so frustrated and worried that she just was like in her computer the entire time trying to fix it. I took literal naps just like in the middle of the space because I was so tired at the end of like the 4th day. My team loves to go out for seafood, and I'm allergic to seafood, so surviving is also really a challenge for me because we always go to places where you get bowls of crabs and shellfish, and it's a nightmare, but always bring an EpiPen is my advice for everybody.
That's Portland.
That's Portland. So this chandelier is a real bastard. So this was not in the architectural drawings, but when you first walk into the door, this thing is just right in the middle of the sheets. And our client walked in and said, "What is this? Get it out of here." Because it was ruining like the very first like impression that when you walked into the door. But if you'll remember, this is a building from the 1800s, it means you can't just take down a chandelier, which means that if you're Google, you can say, get a historical architect down here, fly them in from Minnesota with 12 hours notice, and have them take this chandelier down. They took it down, or they started like taking it apart, taking photos of all the screws and how everything went together, and then about 4 hours into it realized they weren't going to be able to get it down in time, then reassembled it instead of taking it down because it was faster to put it back up than to take it down. So there's always going to be things that go wrong, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but be able to roll with those punches. And also bring the right equipment. I thought it would be awesome to bring this tiny little HDMI screen instead of plugging in a big like 17-inch monitor. It was not easier. If you can imagine trying to do some Linux programming on that little guy, it was a nightmare. It's even harder when 3 people are trying to diagnose the problem that pops up. Bring the right equipment. Don't be a fool like I was. And just in contrast, also you get to do programming on like a 13-foot screen, so it's like a night and day situation there. Gray screen of death. So, despite the fact this is a premier event put on by Google in San Francisco, every now and then the internet would drop out. And our system would go, it would look like this. There's literally nothing we could do about this because we couldn't detect it, because if we detected it, that would mean that our project was up, but our project couldn't be up to detect that there was a problem. And so about once every 2 hours, this thing would pop up on one of the screens. And so one of our producers, this is an artist rendition, one of our producers would walk over, stand in front of it, pretend to check his phone, and then I'd like give him a thumbs up, he'd go like this, and he'd just like walk away to prevent anybody from seeing this like monstrosity of 404 error. So it's all about creative solutions in the moment because they're going to happen, and trying to be able to fix them in a good way. And then also celebrating. So this is how we celebrate at Instrument when we have a launch. We ring a big gong. It vibrates the whole building. It's a beautiful moment for everybody to celebrate. So it's all about celebrating those moments. I'm assuming the shellfish part is also celebration, but again, that falls into my survive and thrive portion. But celebrate with the people around you who are there. So to wrap up, show, don't tell. Tell the right story, not the whole story, and move quickly from talking to doing. That's it. Questions? Questions?
So I know this was a Google event and Google product. How did you communicate to the attendees that this was actually built on Google stuff and not just something else?
So there are two ways. One, there were little plaques next to it, which were sort of like museum plaques, and that would tell you what was happening on the screen. But also there were Google employees that sort of like walked around and helped people, but also could answer questions, and they would be sort of a liaison for those moments. Yep.
The exhibition hardware, was that custom ordered? Were those, for example, the screens that you were using for the ASCII mirrors, were those high-end off the shelf? I assume the 13-foot screen was a custom order.
Yes. So all custom orders. We actually worked with this really great partner named VT Technologies who helped us fabricate the structures that would go around it. So the facade around the 13-foot wall, and then also the structure that goes around the ASCII mirrors. But we sourced the hardware, and we basically told VT like where to get those pieces from. We didn't have any of that, and essentially, except for the 13-foot LED screen, which Google rented, they bought those things, so they have these packages that they can take around. And also those frames were retractable. You could take them off and put different frames on them. So if you went to an education event, you could paint like some bright googly colors on that and have if you were at a school, or if, like a point of contention for me was there were these super sleek frames, and I wanted these big ornate gold ones because we were in this super old building. But it's my own personal preference for the moment. But
So the only off-the-shelf hardware then was like the Alienware computers that you re-imaged, maybe some webcams?
yeah, webcams off the shelf. Yep. Webcams off the shelf. Also, side note, if you try and order 20 computers from Dell, they will reject your order. So make sure that if you have to do that, you order it early. So, fun fact. They thought we were trying to scam them, but they didn't tell us that until 2 weeks into order. So they just canceled it and didn't tell anybody. Fun facts.
Did you brainstorm any projects on Google Keep?
No, that was actually not part of the app suite, or the app suite that we had to work with.
How big was the installation team?
The installation team was, let's go back.
Was it like,
It was these people, minus this guy, who was one of our clients.
that was physically, like, everybody that installed, like, did all the cable running, did all the,
The entire team
Yeah.
was much larger
Yeah.
because there was like a keynote event and there was like live streaming
Yeah.
and there was a bunch of stuff. I say overall the event
Right.
was probably about 50 people who were doing installation.
okay.
Yeah. Can't do any of that because those are all union jobs.
Right.
Don't touch a cord at an installation because you will get yelled at by somebody from it,
Yep.
by union.
Yeah.
You guys know about that in Pittsburgh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
I got some. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have those, they're not very many in Portland, so. Questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that the ASCII mirror was open source somewhere. Where can we find that? And is there any other projects that are open source too?
So all four of these are open source. A Moto booth has been used in, probably about 40 or 50 events all around the world because people and then basically posted all the photos from that. The Query It is online, including all of the data sources and all of the databases that we use. And then these two, the ASCII mirror and the sheets are also they're on the instrument repo. So you can go to github.com/instrument and find all of those.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Have any of these been used outside of like a Google or just a general party context? Like has people used some of the quiz stuff in an education setting or a Moto booth in a mental health setting?
No and no, but those are great applications. Especially the second one. Basically, they're used at conferences or events, like you said. It's generally the place that people use them. But again, it's open source, so people could use them for pretty much anything that they wanted. More questions? Any more questions? Yeah.
For the ASCII mirror, did you try to did you try to do anything like play with colored text or anything like that?
Yes. So the reason why we couldn't do it with color is because the doc is just a bunch of divs that are all need to be wrapped in spans, and they have their own DOM bloat. Every time you wanted to change the font or the color or the size or anything like that, you needed to wrap it in a span, and that basically made the whole thing much slower, just because it had to re-render instead of one inner HTML DOM element, it had to render 75 all within like a quarter of a second. So color became basically like a no-go for us. So we had to rely on the black and white.
I see. And was the limiting factor there like the communication with Google, or is it like the rendering capabilities?
Rendering capabilities, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Because basically anything that goes into it, it then has to basically cut it up and then sort it all out and then add, like I said, 75, 100, 150 new spans in there and render it all by the time you try to add the next thing in. And it was not a good process. So, yeah. All right. Hold on. That's all I got. That's all I got. Questions. That's it. Whoa, just like leaves the presentation. Okay. Thank you everybody for having me. Thank you at home.